Publius Virgilius Marin, often nicknamed Virgil, was an ancient Roman poet. His poems have always been read and considered most praiseworthy, linking the founding of Roman culture to the Trojan War, describing one of the most tragic romances ever written, explaining the fundamental source of Roman conflict with Carthage. In this video, you may learn details about one of the books in Virgil's eternal renown epic, the Aeneid. Book VII. Why Hera Hates Immigrants. The prior book ended with the Trojan refugees leaving a southwestern Italian shore and heading to central Italy where they intend to settle a new city. Along their journey, they pass by the island of Circe. You must remember that this is the witch that entrapped Odysseus for nearly 10 years. From afar, the Trojans can hear the roars and howls of various animals. These are all men that the sorceress has transformed. Luckily, Neptune intervenes and guides their boats by controlling the ocean's flow away from the evil hostess. The next morning, they arrive at the Tiber's mouth, their final destination. Curiously, as if beginning his book anew, Virgil invokes the aid of the muse, Erato, to help him relate the subsequent events. Doing so, the poet foreshadows that there will be war, tragic love, and many challenges. The narrative turns away from the Trojans and speaks of the native Italians. It turns out that central Italy has many rulers, many kings. Special focus is paid to a certain Latinus. The poet describes this man's ancestry and heritage. He has no surviving male children and only one daughter. This young woman is set to marry a prince from another Italian city, a prince named Turnus. The native king, Latinus, had been forewarned by several signs and prophesied about the coming of the Trojans. The first sign was an inundation of bees. The second was that his daughter's crown was brought to spontaneous combustion. The king's priests tell him that he must marry his daughter with the leader of the migrants. Let me quote what the seer says of the incoming Trojan leader.
His race, in arms, and arts of peace renowned. Not Latium shall contain, nor Europe bound. It is theirs whatever the sun surveys around.
Meaning, the Trojans, or the descendants of Aeneas, will rule the world. Returning to the arrival of the refugees, the poet describes how they disembarked, prepared a meal, and began forming a camp. I rather enjoyed Aeneas' line after he makes a brief prayer.
Enjoy the present hour. Adjourn the future thought.
It seems like a cynic refrain. Unfortunately, the early Christians adulterated the term cynic. It was one of the main Roman philosophies during the early and Middle Republic. Returning to the poem, Aeneas sends groups of boys or young men to explore and to bring gifts to every nearby city. Some of these arrive at the city of Latinus. The palace is extensively described, from images of Cronus to military ornament. There is reference to a certain Picus as the founder of the city. According to myth, this man incredibly rejected Circe's seductions and therefore, in punishment, she transformed him into a bird. When the boys speak to Latinus, they explain that the Trojans wish to make a new home. Of their words, let me quote.
We beg what you without want may spare. Simply share the common water and air. We ourselves will build our own mean abodes, fit to receive and serve our banished gods.
Latinus not only agrees to let them make their new homes, but also grows convinced that they are the visitors that were prophesied. Therefore, the king makes one request: that Aeneas marry his daughter. Wishing to court agreement, the king also gives the boys several horses and a chariot as gifts. Cheerful, the Trojan youths leave to tell Aeneas better news than what they could ever had hoped for. Not all is well, however. In the meantime, Hera looks down with envious eyes. The poet quotes her long monologue complaining about how she has not been able to destroy the Trojans. Eventually she concludes,
At least I can defer the nuptial day, and with protracted wars the peace delay. Another queen brings forth another brand, to burn with marriage fires another land. A second Paris, different only in name. His country will burn as he rekindles the flame.
It must be remembered that the princess was already promised to a native Italian. Is this story not? Surely it is, an insinuation of why natives might scorn migrants, LOL. To fulfill her aim, Hera requests the aid of a most hideous fury, one that lives in Hades. Its name is Alecto, and it is funny how the poet describes her.
Even Pluto hates her misshapen shape. Her sister Furies fly her hideous face. So frightful are the forms the monster takes. So fierce the hissings of her speckled snakes.
The goddess gives this beast the duty of sowing hate and war in the hearts of all the natives. The beast first visits Amida, the princess who is already frustrated by the change in her appointed marriage. Virgil describes how the fury mounts the princess, injects her heart, and has her snakes crawl on her naked body. The princess rises and tells her father about her unhappiness. She wishes to marry Turnus, the native Latin. In her pleads, she mentions how Turnus, as most Italians, as most people everywhere, are also the descendants of foreigners. I rather like the insinuation in the lines.
No, all are foreign, in a larger sense. Not born your subjects or derived from hence.
Since her father will not retract, the princess breaks out into a mad fury. She runs all over the palace and the city bewailing her condition. Eventually, she finds a group of dames and, beckoning the power of Dionysus, convinces them to join her in a so-called orgy.
If there be anyone here who dare maintain my right, nor think the name of mother vain, unbind your fillets, loose your flowing hair, and orgies and nocturnal rites prepare.
This notion of female Dionysian orgies is rather foreign to seemingly any contemporary culture. One would guess that Christianity utterly forbade such things, thus, they were forgotten. Either way, let it be known that there was not, necessarily, anything sexual in the frenzy, rebellion, or celebration. It was merely women drinking and partying by themselves without men. With the women leaving the town and entering the woods in protest, the fury leaves to visit and likewise corrupt the heart of Turnus. Initially, the beast changes herself into the image of Hera, the goddess, and tells the warrior all about the Trojan War and how once again the Trojans wish to steal another bribe, his own. The man is not moved, however. Infuriated, the fury returns to her natural appearance. Remember, she is so horrid that even Pluto, the king of Hades, finds her sickening. She mounts Turnus and sinks her hand deep into his heart. The result is that the young man is filled with rage and clamor for war. While Turnus begins the task of gathering troops and support for the coming struggle, it is Aeneas' son, Aeneas, that inadvertently triggers the conflict. Yes, alas, the youth foolishly breaks the native law and thus justifies Turnus' calls for war. The poet describes how, while hunting for wild stags, the youth killed a Latin pet. Yes, incredibly, it is described that a family had a male deer as a pet. The family had reared the animal since it was young, and they are most grieved by its loss. The head of the household in question, a certain Tereus, being most angry at the murder of his pet deer, fights the Trojan youth and the group of children that accompany him. The fury rises in the air and blows some sort of magic, most powerful horn. The sound of this instrument drives belligerence into the hearts of all the people of the region. Therefore, the minor conflict between the youths and the household of the murdered pet turns into a large battle where blood is shed and some are killed. I should mention, historically, pets have always been a source of conflict among humans. There is no shortage of stories, all over the world, of people that fight because of what began as an issue involving pets, LOL. The fury returns to Hera, who congratulates her efforts and bids her to return to the underworld. The prior conflict ends indecisively. A large throng of Latins gathers at Latinus court. The people all ask the king to declare war, but the king refuses. Curiously, herein the poet invents an origin to a most fundamental of Roman customs. He says,
A solemn custom was observed of old, which the Latium held, and now the Romans hold. Before his temple stand, the dire abode, and the feared issues of the furious god. Basin bolts secure and keep the gate, and wary Janus doubly guards them closed. Then heaven's imperious queen shot down from high, At her approach, the brazen hinges fly. The gates are forced and every falling bar. And like a tempest, issues out the war.
Although many historians claim that the temple whose doors could only be opened when at war was a creation of Numa Pompilius, Virgil has it that this custom existed well before the founding of the city. Either way, as the king refused war, goddess Hera herself opened the doors and the armies began assembling. The native Latin force was comprised of 5 cities. The poet begs the aid of the muses to help him describe the marshalling and the most critical heroes. As such, this portion more than any prior is reminiscent of the Iliad. Many individuals are named. Too many for me to explain with any detail. Furthermore, it would not be essential to know such heroes in detail. Let me quote an example of the descriptions. Speaking of a certain Aventinus, the poet sings,
His father's hydra fills his ample shield. 100 serpents hiss about the brims. The son of Hercules he justly seems, by his broad shoulders and gigantic limbs.
Know that all have their unique qualities. On one occasion, a pair of twins is mentioned. Another brings expert slingers that fight naked, without either armor or clothing. Some of these individuals come on chariot, others on horse, and others yet merely on foot. One of them is a priest that has mastered the use of poisons. One is referenced as the son of Hippolytus, therefore the grandchild of Theseus. However, most peculiar and worthy of note was a female warrior. Let me quote,
Last, from the Volscians fair Camilla came, and led her warlike troops a warrior dame. Unbred to spinning, in the loom unskilled, she chose to be the nobler palace of combat. Men, boys, and women, stupid with surprise, wherever she passes, fix their wondering eyes. Longing they look, and gaping at the sight, devour her over and over with vast delight.
So much for any who may think that this tale, this poetic myth, would not be fit for a contemporary movie. LOL. Needless to mention, much action remains. Now, to encourage you to watch until the final video of the series, I gift you an aphorism I came up with as I read this poem.
Although those who witness it become fearful, those who suffer it often grow fearless of pain.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.